Alright, in this video tutorial we're going to take a look at how to do a quick painting of a tree using gouache. And I started out with an F pencil drawing on watercolor paper of a little tree. We're going to need some nylon brushes as well. We're also going to need a set of gouache and some water, of course. And I'm going to use a disposable palette here. So we're going to start with some burnt sienna. We're also going to be using yellow ochre. Also going to be using leaf green. It's the name of the color. The brand of the paint is Reeves Gouache. Some ultramarine blue. A little bit of medium yellow. Some white. And a little bit of light blue. Now gouache is basically like opaque watercolor paint. It can be used like watercolor paint, but then it can also be used a little bit like acrylic as well. So I'm going to start using it like watercolor paint. I'm going to do a wash for the sky in the background. I'm going to thin it out with a lot of water and just bring my strokes down, going in a horizontal fashion. Now I've seen many different people use gouache in many different ways. What I'm showing you here is just one way that you can approach using gouache. Some people like to work on illustration board or gessoed masonite. You can even gesso illustration board and create texture there. And use the gouache in a thicker manner. You may revisit gouache a little bit down the road and create another video tutorial where the gouache is used a little bit thicker, but we're going to be using it in a similar fashion to watercolor paint. We're going to get thicker in some areas, but a lot of the process that we're going to be doing today is similar to watercolor paint. Alright, I'm going to add a little bit of a darker blue to my sky just to darken it up just a little bit towards the top. And I'm going to go right over the top of the tree. Now I've mixed a brown here. You'll notice that of the colors that we put on our palette there was no brown. So to create this brown, what I did is I used a little bit of blue and a little bit of the burnt sienna and mixed it together and made a brown. It's actually a really dark brown. Now I'm going to start adding the areas on the tree that are the shaded areas or the darker areas. A good way to think about this is like you're creating an underpainting. You're just trying to get the darker values on the paper. And each time I go back to the gouache, I kind of mix it up a little bit more so I have a little bit of variety in the shadows that I create. In some areas you're going to see a little bit more blue, in some areas you're going to see a little bit more of the burnt sienna. Alright, after we've done that, we've let that dry a little bit. Now I'm going to go back with the lighter green, the yellow green, and I'm going to start going right on top of some of the darker areas. Some of the lighter areas are going to get hit with this too. And I'm also going to try to, when I'm making my marks, I'm thinking about the leaves and the texture of the leaves. When you stand back from a tree and look at it from a distance, you can almost see areas of light and areas of dark. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to create those areas of light and areas of dark, but I'm trying to keep the texture of the leaves there as well. Here again, every time I go back and I get some more gouache on my brush, mixing the green again, having a little bit of yellow in it, a little bit of blue, and by doing this I'm going to create a variety of different greens and make the tree look a little bit more realistic. Now in this image our light source is primarily coming from the upper right hand corner. So the upper right hand side of the tree is going to have lighter values compared to darker values, more prominent darker values on the bottom left hand side of the tree. I'm also going to work back and forth between the lights and the darks. Every time I add a lighter area, I may go back and add a little bit of a darker area. And in some of these areas I'm making darker greens. You can start to see that develop a bit. I am using a photo reference for this, and I'm paying really close attention to that photo reference, and I'm just trying to pick out the dark areas and the light areas and get those on there and get them as close to accurate to my photo reference as possible. Here you can see I'm building up some of the darker areas on the bottom left-hand side of the tree. By creating that contrast between the darks and the lights, you're going to make your tree feel like it has a sense of volume there. You're going to make it, you're going to help create that illusion of form that we're after. What's so great about gouache is it dries really quickly, so you can work all around the surface virtually at the same time, and you're not going to run into any of the problems that you do with watercolor paint, where you have to kind of let each layer dry. You do have to let some drying happen, but not to the extent with watercolor, since gouache dries so quickly. I'm going to let some of the texture of the trees come off the edges just a bit. There needs to be some highlights on the left side of the tree, even though the light source is coming from the right side. Now the middle part of my tree is a little bit too transparent, so I'm going to go in with some darker green and close that up just a little bit. You do want to preserve some of the breaks in the tree. Again, working the darks and the lights back and forth. Alright, now we're ready to move on to the ground, and I'm going to start with the ground that's the furthest away and just add a light yellow-green wash there. Then in the foreground we're going to add yellow-green again. We're just going to have a little bit more green in that yellow-green. It's going to make it appear a little bit closer. We'll go back with a little bit of blue here and there and create some darker spots. Then I'm going to take the flat end of a brush, my flat brush. I'm going to spread out the bristles just a little bit, and then I'm going to pull upward, and that's going to help create the illusion of grass. Do this while the paint is still a little bit wet. Now there's a little bit of shadow underneath the tree, so I'm going to add a little bit of blue and green underneath there. And then again with my brush, I'm going to create the illusion of grass. Just pulling up slightly while the paint is still wet on the surface. I'll go back again with the blue and green. And again with the brush, the flat brush. Just pull up. And then we'll touch that up. A few more grass blades out here. Now we're going to put a little bit of highlight on the side of the tree where the light source is coming from. And I'm going to add that same color here and there in the grass. And there you have it. You have a quick little demonstration of how to paint a tree using gouache. I wish you all the best of luck in your own gouache paintings.